Welcome to today's presentation, Steering Through Turbulent Waters. How has COVID-19 and working from home orders impacted operational due diligence on investment managers? Thank you for joining myself, Jeremy Siegel. I'm the CEO of Portfolio BI and our subject matter experts. Ahead of diving into today's subject, we wanted to review a few housekeeping items. Today's event should be about 30 minutes. We have allocated time at the end for Q&A. If you had submitted questions ahead of the event, we will answer those questions at the time of the end. If we don't get to your questions at the end, we'll try and reach them offline. There's some buttons on the bottom, some icons, chat, raise your hand, and Q&A. So you can submit questions via Q&A if you need, or raise your hand if you have any issues. And if you have any other technical issues, raise your hand. If I missed anything, we'll try and get to it later at the Q&A, but I want to kick it off. So let's go to the first slide. So I'll just have Julio and Stuart introduce themselves.
Sure. Thanks, Jeremy. Great to be here. And my name is Julio Garcia. I am the founding partner of FLSV Fund Consulting Services. We're an investment operations consulting firm focusing on the C-suite solutions for hedge funds, private equity, and family offices. So we're here to build operational efficiency using cloud-based solutions and working along with the Portfolio BI guys. And it's been a great start for us. So happy to be here.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Julio. Stu Chapman. So I'm a director, head of ODD at Strategic Investment Group. Strategic is an outsourced CIO about to celebrate our 33rd anniversary. About 27 billion under AUM, 27 institutional clients across the gamut, private pension, endowment foundation, sovereign wealth, etc. And yeah, excited to be here as well.
Great. And then just my background. So I've been CEO of Portfolio BI in Lux for going on 3 years now. Prior to that, I worked at Credit Suisse and I ran a business consulting team globally, working with new and existing hedge funds buy side around the globe, helping them get ready for ODD, putting systems and workflow in place, operational efficiency. Okay, thank you. So let's move to the next slide. So Portfolio BI, just a quick what we do for a living. We're a software-based company and we have a web EDM, OMS, PMS, security master, and a consulting group. And we work with the buy side, helping them with all aspects of the workflow from front to back on multi-asset class hedge funds, equity, long, short, you name the gamut. And next slide. So today's discussion. So we're going to talk about a few different topics. What are investors' expectations, given the remote workforce? So we're just going to kind of go through these one by one. So what are investors' expectations for portfolio management and trading, operations, compliance, and technology? Given the remote work environment, how are investment managers leveraging technology to meet new ODD demands? Is there really a drive to do more with less? What is the biggest difference between in-person and ODD versus remote ODD? And then we'll talk about the future. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So transitioning ODD into COVID times. So we hear a lot about this. Question is for you guys on the line. What are you seeing with new managers? Do you see people delaying investments? How do you see that approaching? And or about how the process is changing on the approval side if it's managers you already know. So Julio, do you want to start?
Yeah, I don't mind starting. Just to kind of step back a little bit, what we saw March, April, May is that the markets were going through tough times. Managers, investors, really allocators are really frozen to figure out what was going on, how long would this move prolong, and eventually you come to June, July, August is where managers realize hey, this is going to be far longer than we expect. Markets are roaring. We need the returns. We need to allocate. And if this is the new normal, then we really need to adapt to the new normal. So in that period of time, managers realized look, tech solutions have been around. Managers who were agile enough to already be in the cloud, managers who were thinking about the cloud really moved into the cloud, and managers who were late to the cloud really probably have the tougher times. Allocators had to allocate, they need the returns. So they stepped forward, looked at new managers, looked at existing managers, and then started adopting the new normal. So, cyber solutions or digital solutions is where it's at, and that's where managers and allocators have to get comfortable.
Yeah, I would echo all of Julio's sentiments. We kind of went through all three of these stages. So yeah, March, April, called a timeout, and worked through what was already in our existing pipeline. Made sure everybody we had currently allocated to was adjusting, new communication styles, new collaboration tools, all those sorts of things. Then we moved into the current manager portfolio. It was much easier in May, June to allocate to managers that were already existing in the portfolio. And yeah, over the summer, July, August, we've allocated to new manager relationships where the investment team has been on site, where they visited our office, or where no one's been on site for certain international managers. So gotten comfortable with remote ODD, implemented a few new operational procedures, increased vendor due diligence, increased ODD reference checks, background checks, those sorts of things. But I would say we are still members of the cult of the onsite. I think in terms of building relationships, I don't think the onsite's going away, but perhaps in terms of ongoing monitoring, we may be able to leverage virtual or remote onsites more frequently.
But to add, I think the key is that managers are developing closer relationships. Strangely enough, in the digital world, they're connecting closer to their managers because now it's a slower process. It's a more of a transparent process. Managers need to show their work and really need to show things that they may be a little less reluctant to show in the past, even in the office. Now have no other solution but to share what they have and really present a better case for the manager. So in retrospect, I mean, COVID really will improve transparency to managers and to allocators.
Yeah, I definitely would echo those comments as well. Yeah, there are certain things from COVID that I hope stick around, right? Curbside pickup being one of them. But definitely an increase in transparency. Yeah, the fact that you don't have to squeeze it all into one on-site allows you to have more meetings, more people both at strategic are able to join across the different teams, whether it's legal, HR, IT, or the investment team, and vice versa. At the manager, you can either break up into multiple modules from middle back office, or there's just more attendees available since people aren't traveling or don't have, or I guess more readily available.
And Jeremy, I think you had said this in one of our discussions that it seems like everyone shows up to meetings now.
Correct. Correct. So when it comes to an efficiency perspective, I think that's something I see, and I think it's probably better for the funds themselves. So if you're not traveling, you don't have vacation time, you're around, then you're getting the calls done more efficiently because you're getting everybody you need in one shot, right? Instead of having, and then what Stuart, you mentioned is getting, select teams. So instead of having, 15 people sit through a meeting because you're only going to be there for a little while, you could have a legal call specifically, or a compliance call, or a technology call, very select and targeted. So I do think from an efficiency perspective, we're probably using our time more wisely. And there's more availability of folks to be reached. The question is, how does that play out longer term? And do people say at some point, I got to get back to the office post-COVID, and we get back to the old routine of people traveling, and so this might be just for now, but for now I'm enjoying it personally from that perspective. Okay, the next slide, please. So Keyman clauses. So this comes up a lot in general with hedge funds. In general, Keymen are really hard to replace at hedge funds. What are you seeing differently now on the Keyman side based on COVID specifically? Are you seeing more specifics? And I know a little bit of, we were talking about when we had a pre-call about the third parties and how that's affecting. So it's not just a Keyman of the fund, it's also a Keyman of your service provider. So, Julio, why don't you kick off with that?
Sure. Hang on a second. I hope my battery doesn't. I look at it as key providers. I think a lot of the ODD professionals are looking at really now that they're, what are the stress points? Now that they're working with the service providers, and you really need to focus on the providers and make sure that the controls are in place, because now it's about the weakest link. A distributed workforce, distributed providers, it's how you manage through the connection point. So the weakest link is what's going to concern them, and they're going to focus their efforts on making sure and probably slow the process down to make sure that those connections are in better shape. So I view that as not key man clauses, but more so key provider clauses or key provider connections.
Yep.
Yeah. Thankfully, we haven't had any, key person clauses triggered in this environment. I would definitely agree that succession planning is a topic that we've started to bring up again. In the COVID environment, it could be an individual, but it also could be an entire trading desk. So making sure there's cross training. I think the two words, of the pandemic are resiliency and redundancy. So those are items we've been stressing in all new relationships and existing relationships. And definitely part of that is the third party service provider relationships. The weakest link is most likely to break, and some of the third parties are offshoring different services to other countries, and so that's definitely a focus area for us. Luckily, there hasn't been necessarily any smoking gun per se, but always the opportunity for improvement, increased communication, increased transparency.
Interesting on just location. So we talk a little bit about historically having funds all wanting their teams working together in one location for sharing information. And now are we moving to a different paradigm where Keymen comes in, where maybe you want to split things up? I know on the sell side, pre 9/11, everybody wanted to be in one building. And then post 9/11, they said, wait a second here, maybe this isn't such a good idea. How do you guys feel about that going forward?
We learned the hard way during Hurricane Sandy. We were in one of the buildings that then just got shut down because there was no power. And then, mass transit got shut down. So we realized that your distributed workforce is what you need to have in place. So we started about 7 years ago. I was the president and chief operating officer and chief compliance officer of Contour Asset Management, a technology, media, and telecommunications business in New York City. We needed to make sure that that business can operate anytime, anywhere, any place. So we focused on the distributed workforce many, many years ago, and then moved into the cloud much sooner than most. In the age of the pandemic, it really was a non-event for Contour because we were already prepared. We had tested. We'd make sure that people would operate from home. We'd force people to work from home just to see what behavioral issues they had in terms of, I can't print, I can't do this, I can't send, we just made sure to get through a lot of the behavioral issues. And then it naturally worked. So during difficult times, whether it's nor'easters or tropical storms or the pandemic, it really should be a non-event.
Yeah, the transition to work from home has been seamless. Transition to remote workforce has been seamless for all of our managers and for strategic. Definitely want to give a credit and a pat on the back to all of the CTOs out there, all of the COOs. That took feedback, improved their operations, improved their resiliency, and also spent some money. Yeah, I think the biggest bottleneck in March was actually getting additional machines, getting additional cameras. Was kind of the Amazon effect at the end of the day. All of the infrastructure was very resilient.
Great. We asked a question just now, a poll for the audience, just about work hours. So one of the challenges, when you're not commuting is when do you stop working, right? So you have an extra hour in theory. Most New Yorkers have at least an hour commute each way. So that's a minimum of 2 hours more a day that you have to work. But then people have personal lives and they have children in theory or other people they're taking care of. So how does this balance out? And then when do people stop working? And are we worrying about burning out and culture? And I'm just curious your guys' thoughts on that, Stuart.
Sure. So at Strategic, our ODD team has been zooming across the world. So we've been in Cape Town, Singapore, Hong Kong, Luxembourg, Amsterdam, London, to name a few of the international jurisdictions. Not sure how we would have got it done if we were traveling, but everything's been very efficient. I agree the workday has expanded, but there's a little bit more flexibility there. For me personally, the only time I was alone during the day was during my commute. So definitely miss that in terms of meditation, etc. Strategic's been trying to encourage everybody to get outside either during their lunch hour, before work, or after work. Trying to set office hours. So 9 to 5, 8 to 6. I'm not sure there ever was a 40-hour work expectation. There has been some times where things have bled over, but there's a little bit more flexibility at the end of the day as well.
Julio, what are you seeing?
There's a newfound appreciation for schools, right? And then getting your kids to school, out of the house. My daughter goes to a French school, and on Wednesdays I forget that she gets home at noon, and I'm like, oh no, she's here. So then she Zoom bombs, and then you're trying to figure out how to manage your home life plus your kids. So the day's probably gotten longer, but I think I've gotten smarter with how to manage it and really try to focus my efforts when I had the right period of time. Don't start something that I couldn't finish, and really just been a little bit more thoughtful. The thing that you don't have when you're commuting into the office is the chit chat, right? The chit chat, whether you believe it or not, wastes a lot of time. It's great to chit chat with people, talk football and all those things, but then that just really delays your day as well about getting things done. So I think there's a fine balance. I think that chit chat has kind of moved towards the family now, and trying to get them settled and out of the house. But then, I think there's a clear focus on getting your work done.
Okay, interesting transition to the next question. So you talked about a little bit about chit chat and team meetings as well. And then this is more culturally related. So, when everybody's sitting around the office on the trading desk or nearby, people walk over and grab someone and ask them a quick question. But then when you start working remotely, the question is, how do you make sure things are being done correctly? So securities valuation is obviously a huge topic for investors, making sure the book is being priced correctly. And then typically funds have a meeting, whether it's monthly if they're more liquid positions, or less frequently depending on if there's an illiquid position. How does that work in a remote world? How do you make sure that people are actually having these meetings? Especially because it's not a matter of simply just walking into a conference room. It's a matter of getting the entire team on the phone. Stuart?
Again, oh, sorry.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so when we're conducting operational due diligence, we're starting with the valuation policy. We're confirming, the existence, and then, we're typically wanting to see a sample of valuation committee notes, attendees, those sorts of things. And the transition to remote, hopefully more people can attend, to be honest. So people that aren't necessarily on the committee, but observers. We've seen, definitely a use of increased inputs. So increased use of different pricing sources, increased use of valuation agents in certain examples. And for some strategies, we have seen an increase in level 3 securities. But at the end of the day, as long as the underlying policy, procedures, committees in place, I guess frequency as well. We've seen an increase in frequency in certain strategies as well.
Interesting. And in terms of, to the point about transparency, right? NDAs are now a bit more common, right? People will show NDAs to share their work. And honestly, it goes down to 4th grade. You're going to have to show your work. You're going to screen share. You're going to communicate with people a little bit differently electronically. We adopted to that early on, so we could sign letters. We had Zoom meetings. We had Slack meetings. We were using messaging quite active. You can have one-on-one meetings. You can schedule hosted meetings as you're doing today. That's been a bit more common practice in the business that I've developed over the last 7 years. But I think it's going to be a bit more of the 4th grade, show your work, show your math, and really screen share a bit more. And that's the point of, you're going to have to show more of your work to your investors, and it's going to create a closer connection. And those are the things, it's hard to take them away once you've given them to them. And once you've already adopted and shown that information, it's hard to take it back.
Right. So do you think you would get screenshots of someone's valuation committee notes or minutes?
Well, no screenshots. No, typically, we would get the valuation policy, and then we would be able to observe them. But it's under the guise that we're not going to take screenshots. Similar to, we wouldn't break out our cell phones in a meeting and take a picture.
Right. Are they showing you? I misspoke. Sorry. I mean, more, are they showing you the minutes on the screen on the camera that, hey, we actually have minutes from this meeting? Are you seeing that kind of thing from the show your work perspective, to what Julio was saying?
After signing an NDA, potentially, existence and verification, again, kind of a sample of one. And then, if there are specific securities or questions we have, third-party marks, those sorts of things, then, usually people are willing to share with an NDA in place, and, an understanding that things won't be screenshot.
Right, and data rooms have become a bit more prevalent, right? They were there, not so much on the hedge fund side, more on the M&A side, on the private equity side, but it's a bit more prevalent in the hedge fund world, where you're now showing documents you may not be able to print. It's hard to restrict someone from taking pictures, but that's what your NDA does. You're hoping that, right, it's a relationship with a client, and the client's not going to do something to damage itself, but it's about showing a lot of the information.
Watermarked and time restricted, data rooms, definitely agree with that.
Right, okay. The next topic is NAV and AUM triggers. I don't know if we are seeing any kind of change in that space. That's kind of a thing that's hard to monitor in general, because people have different documentation with different brokers. So how do you see that, or different custodians? How are you seeing that through COVID?
I don't think it's much different than it has been in person, right? To the extent you have, right, a big redemption, and you're showing your NAVs to the counterparties, they're going to get on the phone and call you, right? They're going to have a credit review. You're going to have the same things that you've had. I just think it's right. Working from home has really elongated the cord back to the office, right? So it's really no difference. You're just maybe separated by distance, but the practice is still the same. You're still going to go through your month-end process. You're still going to do your reporting. You're still going to show the counterparties information. You're still going to have to adjust to AUM triggers. You're still going to have to address your side letters. You're still going to have to talk to counsel, right, and the board, right? So none of those things change. It's just you're probably a bit more alone than you were in the past, but it's not going to change the actual process.
Understood.
Yeah, agreed. In March, we definitely saw, NAV triggers, ISDA triggers, et cetera. Most of that was due to market moves, not necessarily to redemptions. And then, in terms of communication, much of that communication was either done in person or over conference calls. Now it's just done via video calls. So from the director point of view, I think people have been happy with how those new communication methods have worked.
Okay, great. Let's go to the next slide, the next topic. So cash movements. Interesting on cash movements. I've had CFOs tell me that they would show processes on their computer, and they say if an ODD person was in their office, say, look, just come around my monitor. I'll show you what I do. Are you seeing stuff like that now? Again, to Julio's point, show your work. Are they showing you their monitor and showing you their process?
There were definitely desk side procedures. We want to see systems reviews. See that there is 4 eyes, dual check approvals in place. Usually we're happy to accept a document. Occasionally we'll ask to see an example of one. Kind of depends on the fund, the setup. Around cash, I would say that there have been an increase in spoofing emails. We have been asking about increase in testing, increase in training around those sorts of things as people take their office home or work home, or people maybe a little bit more lackadaisical in terms of their procedures. So making sure everything that applied in the office is also applying to the remote work.
Okay.
Yeah, use of digital signatures have been around for some time. It's just a matter of how are you working with your counterparties to make sure they accept them. One difficulty we had was that the commercial banks didn't really take digital signatures, but then you move to portals. Right now, portals became the new paper trail. So a lot of people have moved off of movement of paper and signatures physically to online portals where they put, first sign or second sign or approval processes in place, including to the mobile device as well.
Yeah, we've seen increased adoption of DocuSign, where it wasn't necessarily an option before. And people increasing comfort, maybe forced adoption, but at the end of the day, I think it does make people more efficient.
That's a great word, forced adoption. So you think there's a good forced adoption of technology, something that traditionally would just lag in our industry is now being pushed forward. So there's some benefits. There's some positives based on this new world we live in, is that we're adopting new technology.
I'll give you an example. During Hurricane Sandy, where power was kind of a luxury item, I had to sign a side letter, before November 1st. And I was in a Starbucks, consuming their power, and I had to find a way to sign. That's how I found DocuSign. And eventually adopted DocuSign, got it signed, and the investor countersigned it and funded. So you have to learn to get shit done. You have to get shit done. It's about GSD, getting shit done and finding a way to get things done, because it's about other people's property and making sure you're trying to get their property and trying to manage it in a secure and institutional way. So it's about GSD.
Got it. So we kind of covered trade errors and breaks in the same way of cash movements, trying to automate more and move the process forward. Things that were done manually just don't work anymore. Okay, so cybersecurity is definitely a topic that we've been beating up to death for years now, and we all know that there's no permanent fix. We all know that there's issues with ongoing, but now you have people working and doing core procedures like cash movements, trade breaks from home. How does that change during the due diligence process, where people are, instead of behind the corporate firewall, they're on the same network that their kids are on, TikTok?
Honestly, a lot of them are VPNing back into their desk, right? Before, right? Who knows what happens to commercial real estate, but today they're going to VPN back to their desk behind the firewall and operate the way they've operated in the past. A lot of them, hopefully, are scared enough not to have their kids' TikTok work on top of their office work, and that they've separated that many years ago. So I think the adoption is a little different. I can tell just from my wife works from home. She VPNs into her office, and it's just the way of the world. And I know even from the Contour folks, where we're cloud-based and there's some applications sitting behind a firewall, you have to VPN in to get it. So we then tried to move the VPN or the domain controller where you're kind of housing not into the office, but into the cloud as well. So trying to move everything so that the office is more of a convenience center rather than an operating center.
So
Yeah, our preference is, yeah, a firm issue to maintain device, yeah, VPNing into the office, yeah, increase in frequency of updates, increase in training, all those sorts of things. And definitely firms have been targets. There's been a couple large ransomware, crypto kind of locker items in the news recently, you know, perhaps related or unrelated to COVID. But yeah, separation of personal and professional devices.
Right. Interesting. You mentioned the cloud, and we talked about forced adoption of technology. You know, cloud is something that we've been stretching into slowly in the industry. There have been funds that have been very aggressive towards it, and there are funds that are slowly, you know, working their way. Do we think this moves it forward to the benefits you guys were just talking about, in the sense of working remotely and having that connectivity to the cloud, that if there is an issue, you can go anywhere and work remotely?
You had to be agile back in March and April. Right now, if you're thinking about the cloud in October, you're late to the party. Right, you're in the last leg of. You're not going to see many allocations to you because of your legacy infrastructure. So adopting the cloud was very important, and a lot of people, whether they were already in the cloud or thinking about the cloud, there was a rush towards the cloud. You can see it in the earnings reports in Microsoft Azure or AWS, and just the impact that they've seen over the summer. Right, just that. It's exploded into a better place to be, and their security is far better than anyone else's security. Who believes their security is better than AWS or Microsoft? They're honestly not being honest with themselves. So it's about self-evaluating and making sure you can license or lease or borrow or rent someone's security team.
Yeah, definitely a movement to the cloud, definitely a digital transformation project on the majority of managers, kind of project management office timelines. And yes, this has just accelerated that need and requirement as well.
Great. The one thing to raise, Jeremy, I thought this was interesting. I heard this at another panel, is now, right, distributed workforce, people are working from home. Cybersecurity has been predominantly in the home, not in the home, but in the office environment. So now what are people doing at home? So there are firms that are trying to do home cyber assessment, and their IT group hopefully have taken a look at their their connectivity, their network environment, and then what do you do when there's no power source there, or we've had storms in the area where we were out of power for a few days. Like how do people now adapt to kind of being on their own and needing their own source of energy to operate?
Definitely. Where does the office end? Where does the home begin? Yeah, we've seen people giving up hot seats. And so, yeah, there is additional requirements for redundancy at home, whether those are batteries, alternative Wi-Fi sources, kind of all the above. But yeah, you need to know where your people are distributed in terms of the grid. And yeah, if they have generators, definitely would encourage people to do a poll or a survey if they haven't already.
Yeah, I agree.
Any idea of your clients, how many of them have dedicated home devices that are firm sponsored? So instead of having their own desktop or laptop, taking a firm one and using that at home with endpoint security. Is that a trend you see?
Definitely. Yeah. I think that gets you 50% of the way there. That's low hanging fruit, right? Yeah. And in terms of frequency of the updates as well, making sure you have an ability to monitor those updates. Yeah. Making sure you have the ability to monitor if there's kind of abnormal behavior on those devices as well. And then, yeah, the ability to remote wipe those items as well. So yeah, people were traveling before this, right? So they had those kind of on the go capabilities. And yeah, now it's just installing those in the homes as well.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Let's go to the next topic. So this is more of technology. And one of the things that we were talking about was training new people, right? So, we're working from home with the same culture of people. You're basically just transferring that remotely. But how do you bring on new teams? How do you train new people when things are working in a remote basis? And how do you make sure that there's consistency? And technology has definitely been something that you guys have talked about a number of times on this call. I've definitely seen a lot of EDM projects kick off from the buy side where manual processes and spreadsheets are definitely the redhead stepchild of the world. Like, let's get off those, let's move on. Something that the sell side has been forced to do by regulators for many years. Where do you see the benefits specifically on the technology? Where do you think that where managers need to invest more of their time?
Definitely increased digitization, definitely increased systemization, reduction in manual processes. There was a point earlier, doing less with more. I think it's, or doing more with less. It's doing more with more in terms of strategic's view here. In terms of bringing people on, I think collaboration tools, Microsoft Teams, developing conversation streams, more frequent interactions. So making sure you have standing team meetings, standing one-on-ones. Just dialing up all those things you were probably doing before in the office.
Okay.
It's awful because you can't hide now, right? You really have to be online quite actively with your team.
Right. Okay. So it's the bottom. So it's 12:30. I want to kind of move into the Q&A session. We did promise we have 4 questions already submitted, which I'm going to kind of go through. And if people have other questions, feel free to submit them. We'll get to them. So one of the questions that came in is, does the panel believe that performing ODD reviews remotely will become more of a norm rather than the exception once a vaccine is released? So i.e., what we're doing now becomes the standard rather than a one-off. And then specifically, he asked, or she asked, managed account versus fund investment. So if it's a fund of one or a managed account, is that any different than a commingled investment? Do you feel the due diligence process is different?
Sure, happy to jump on that one. So I think initial due diligence, building relationships, there's still going to be an in-person requirement there. After a vaccine, I think the investment team, the ODD team, the consultant, whomever you're using, there's still probably going to need to be that interaction. Now there may be more, digital or remote parts of that, but I still think for that initial due diligence before you kind of cut that first check, it's likely to require some sort of in-person meeting. In terms of ongoing monitoring, I could definitely see that, the increase in frequency, increase in team members, there being some sort of digital footprint there or replacement of what previously was in person. Strategic doesn't do a lot of managed accounts. We do mostly fund investments, fund of one, separately managed accounts. I'd have to defer on that question. There are additional controls in a managed account environment where you may not need to do as much on-site due diligence.
It's not going to change, right? Culture is very important, right? Someone's going to give you their money. They're going to want to see you. They're going to want to understand the culture of the team, how you behave with each other. That will be in person. That will be online. I think there'll be a hybrid period for some period of time, but they will want to come back into the office as long as that team that they need to meet with can also come into the office, right? Vaccine or no vaccine, I think there's going to be a method forward where they're going to have to try to work together in person. Otherwise, they'll be a little bit reluctant to just hand over their money without seeing folks.
I hope it goes back to some of the old norms, because I miss my clients and I miss going to their offices and spending time with them. Honestly, I learn a lot from my clients as they learn from me. It's a give and take. And, the only thing I'm happy to give up is shaking hands. I think that would be a great custom we can give up post COVID, but I hope we do get back into in person. So another question came up about home office DR plans, and if they have a specific plan, and are people putting those together when it's so unique per key employee? Are you seeing people discuss it or more have a theme around it?
I don't see many discussions about it. I honestly don't. Like, here's my home DR solution right there. You see that? But that is my home DR plan, but I don't think I suffered a 5-day outage, and I'm like angry about it because it's even hard to get a generator these days because this area has been backed up. So it's kind of like you just hope for the best, but it should be top of mind if they're going into next year. Right? They're saying, industry saying July is the new January. If that gets kicked down even further, there needs to be kind of a bit more of a discussion behind, home office DR.
Yeah, we've seen generators, we've seen people targeting, doing kind of a matrix of critical functions, making sure there is home backup. If they don't have a generator, sending batteries, that could have a 2-day battery life. We've seen, satellite phones, a variety of different techniques. And with the wildfires out on the West Coast, as well as some of the hurricanes down south on the East Coast, some of those have been kind of real world tests as well. I mean, those hot sites still exist. They may be tough to get into, and you may not be able to social distance. So they're a little less valuable than they were pre-pandemic, but always an option as well.
Great. So now we're kind of shifting gears a little bit onto the compliance side in a remote environment. So this is a question that I asked you both pre-call, and something that I've been asking the industry for a long time. I come from the sell side, where culture of compliance, where you can't bring a cell phone on a trading floor, and there are cameras everywhere, and everything you do is monitored to the point where your bosses read your email. Everything is firm property, essentially. And now you're taking the buy side and you're taking key functions and you're moving them remote. And you have the concept of expert network calls, and you have the concept of people on their cell phone and talking to folks. How does the culture of compliance change in a remote environment? How does that evolve? So it's not new for someone to work from home, but it is new for someone to do it on a consecutive, continuous basis. So the fact of a trader trading at home, is that a new concept? Not really. Is it the fact that the whole trading floor is trading remotely? Yes. So where do you guys feel that goes?
Listen, we've been through, the nor'easters in this area. We've all operated from home. It's just a longer stay-at-home order, right? And I think that the culture of compliance will not change, right? In my prior firm, we did 800 to 900 expert network calls a year. So life goes on. So you are shadow listening. You're getting the approval process. We moved to digital approval a long time ago. There's pre-call attestations. There's post-call attestations. There's reviews. There's reconciliations to usage reports. There's quite a few attestations that have to appear where they're meeting with people one-on-one. Conferences, of course, and bus tours are not going to happen for some time, but the culture should continue on. You still have your requirements to train, hire good people, hire the right people. If you have a compliance, or if you have a non-compliance person, that's the person you focus on. You do more email reviews, you have discussions with them. Unfortunately, you force compliance on them or you force them out. But the culture of compliance has to be, right, we're all in this together, we're all working for someone else's property. Let's not forget that this is not our money. It could be, but for the most part, it's not our money. Let's be fiduciaries in the sense of a fiduciary and do all the things that we would do in person. So I get called when I was chief compliance officer constantly. They used to call me, it was almost like if they had to go to the bathroom, they would ask, so it was just having that interaction with them so they felt comfortable, coming to me. And not to forget, and we had, training sessions with like Ake and Gump, and we just reminded people there's no such thing as team in prison. It's an individual sport. So let's try to help each other, help yourselves from going to prison. So you use the scare tactic approach, but then it really comes to making sure people are doing the right thing and just following and monitoring and managing the team.
Yeah, what existed in the office should extend at home. There should be, more customized training to the risks in the remote workforce. There should be check-ins, right? When we were visiting offices, we wanted to make sure that compliance wasn't far away in a closet somewhere, but was on the trading floor engaging with the investment professionals. So we want the same sort of culture existing in a remote workforce, whether that's office hours, whether that's scheduled, making sure that compliance has a seat at the table in terms of all the different manager committees, relationships, et cetera.
And we would remind people that, listen, you all know the saying, past performance is not reflective of future results, but past behavior should be reflective of future behavior. Right. And they just need to remind the employees of that, right? We are fiduciaries. It's not our money. You can get in big trouble by doing really bad things, right? And you see it in the press every day. So if you don't want to be in the press, do the right thing and be compliant.
Are you guys
go ahead.
Live video going on between the key folks real time all day? Meaning, the history of, we had a London office and a New York office, but we have a live video link so people can talk real time. Are you seeing that between key folks, or is it more of we'll get on a Zoom when we need to?
Yeah, I think it's more when they need to. Like, people need to do their own work. It's individual work. They need to do their own research. right? Unless you're a part of a team and you're consulted with a team and it's a team decision making, then I can see that. But for the most part, it's let's reconvene, do our work, come back, and just chat with each other. But it's a bit more interactive. But there's many tools, right? You can use Slack, Teams, right? Zoom. There's a lot of different ways to connect.
Yeah, it depends on the culture. We've seen some firms that have, an open kind of Zoom room all day long. Some teams are getting together for lunch, or groups are getting together, different frequencies. But yeah, it depends on the culture of the firm.
Great. We have a question on is giving up a hot site a new risk? I'm going to answer that one. I don't see that. I don't think people ever use hot seats. I think when there's a real issue, no one wants to leave their home. They want to be home with their families. Post 9/11, no one went to them. Post Sandy, you couldn't get to them.
Right,
In a
right.
COVID world, you have to be home because of social distancing and you want to be with your family. So I think the whole idea of a hot site, doesn't really work in the short term. Now, in the longer term, if your office isn't available and finding a location to work together, I see that making sense. But in this COVID world, I don't see the need for a hot site. The most I see is people getting together outside in a tent, or in a very large room where they have social distancing. So I think that whole idea of a hot site is, especially with the cloud, I think it's less and less of an issue. Do you guys agree with that?
I think it works for the CTOs, right? They need a place to go. They need a place to operate. It's just going to be smaller, right? It's not going to be a room where you have, the essential staff that need to show up. And my wife, they do their training where they show up to the site and they log in. I always thought that was just silly, because in the end, like nor'easters and storms, like she's not leaving. No one's going to leave to go to these places. The CTO, well, he's like the mailman, right? He has to, all weather, he's got to be there. He's going to show up through hail, wind, storm. He's going to be there. It'll probably be a smaller location for that team. And honestly, if there's someone like a home DR problem where someone needs a place, that may be a good solution. But I think it's going to be smaller, a lot smaller.
And yeah, I think if you are making that decision, you need to survey your people, make sure you have a kind of a map of where people are, who has generators, those sorts of things, and even cannibalize that budget that you save on decommissioning the hot site and getting people, whether it's batteries, generators, or alternative Wi-Fi sources.
Yeah.
Okay. Two more questions, and then we'll kind of leave it there. I guess the one would be, going forward, do we think that the industry is going to spread out more? So we're very clustered because of the talent pool. And from a due diligence process, it's always been, when you're starting up a hedge fund, you want to be in this area because you feel the ODD folks are going to say the team is too diverse. I'm going to open up an office in New York. The question was always, should I open up an office in Manhattan? I don't live in Manhattan. I have to commute in. Can I just have a small office in Connecticut and have some folks work from home? Did you see that kind of a culture changing, where people are going to be opening up offices maybe in Texas? Or you've seen a few funds talk about relocating part of their team. But do you see, having a partner in Atlanta and then a partner in New York and then maybe one in Texas? Is that kind of a future for our industry?
We never cared where people were as long as the work got done. So I don't think for us, speaking from my prior life at a hedge fund shop, it didn't matter where they were. As long as you can connect online, you can connect by phone, you can connect by email, you have messaging. You don't need to sit on top of each other, right? You could sit close enough, and as long as you can connect and the work's getting done and people are following the right protocol, it should be fine. You may have to convene for meetings. You may have to fly in for meetings, right? If there's an important client that's coming and you need to do on-site ODD, that's the decision that person made by being away. You may have to come home sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's a more viable option than before the pandemic, but definitely depends on the culture of the firm as well as the potential opinion of the founder. But yeah, we definitely have seen more people at strategic and at other managers working elsewhere during the pandemic. And yeah, it'll be tough to change those preferences after the pandemic. And yeah, there definitely have been a few big names in the news moving their offices to alternative tax jurisdictions, those sorts of things.
Right. I hear a lot of people saying, I want to give up my office space. What do I need all that office space for? I feel like the offices might get a bit smaller because people are paying ridiculous rents, but I also think rents are going to come down across the board. So I think net things are going to kind of probably stay the same, where people have a home if they want to be in the office, but then they have that flexibility. The idea of everybody going in a remote world, I don't think that's the world that we live in. I think to you guys wanting from a cultural perspective and meeting people in person you guys hit on that a number of times. I just don't see that as a new reality. So I think that, people will still have a home base that everybody shows up to at some point. Last question that we had was on managing third-party risk related to COVID. What's changed and what do vendors expect? So, what are you seeing? We talked a little bit about this in the sense of the due diligence on your vendors, but what are they seeing that's different? What are they expecting?
That's a tough one, right? It then gets into privacy, right?
Yep.
It's just a sensitive area. Speaking from someone I know, they made an investment to have barriers in place that can temperature check, that can spray things on you or what have you. I mean, those are few and far between firms doing that. But I really think no one wants the liability. No one's going to force anything on anybody. No one's going to report if they have anyone who has COVID. It's just going to be, it's a privacy issue. And I think it's going to be hard. It's again, people just have to do the right thing. If you're sick, stay home is the basics. My 5-year-old, wash your hands, do these things, distance, he puts her arm out. Like, that's what I think the world has to just continue to do. And it's hard to then, point to someone and say, oh yeah, those 3 guys had COVID. It's just like, it's at some point, it kind of crosses the line to me.
Yeah, vendor due diligence continues to be a focus area for strategic. We're definitely making sure our managers have a program in place, a risk-based approach, right, where there's some sort of frequency of initial ongoing monitoring. I think that'll be a regulatory focus in the future. But yeah, I don't think that existed before COVID, but yeah, definitely perhaps there is an increased focus there going forward.
Okay. Any last thoughts? I just want to thank you guys for joining. Any last thoughts? Any last things you want to mention?
Listen, I'll just plug Portfolio BI. I think it's a great software. We used it. We saw a really decrease of the CFO's office, the CFO's process. And actually for ODD purposes, it really let us show our work a little bit better than in the past of opening up spreadsheets and doing all these things to show how you close your month end. And it takes 4 days to do these things. It's a great tool. You should take a look at it if you're not really using it. I'm a big believer. I think Jeremy and the team have done a great job, and I would just certainly plug the Portfolio BI guys as a great team to speak to. We're a user. We love it. I think it's a tool that a lot of people will find useful.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you guys hosting the panel. I think it was fantastic. Yeah, thanks again for including us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Stay healthy, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for dialing in.
Be safe out there. Be safe out there.
Have a great
afternoon. Stay safe. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Bye-bye.